Okay, friends, we are just about to start chapter 8. We capture a flag. Remember, in the last one, Percy just had his first night at Camp Half Blood, and he had a tour around Camp Half Blood. If you have not listened to chapter 6 or chapter 7, please make sure you go back and listen to those before you listen to this one so that you know what's going on. Okay? The next few days, I settled into a routine that felt almost normal. If you didn't count the fact that I was getting lessons from satyrs, nymphs, and centaurs. Each morning, I took ancient Greek from Annabeth, and we talked about the Greek gods and goddesses in the present tense, which was kind of weird. I discovered Annabeth was right about my dyslexia. Ancient Greek wasn't that hard for me to read, at least, no harder than English. After a couple of mornings, I could stumble through a few lines of Homer without too much headache. Homer is a very well known Greek philosopher. Remember, we talked about him? Yeah. The rest of the day, I'd rotate through outdoor activities, looking for something I was good at. Kyron tried to teach me archery, but we found out pretty quickly I wasn't any good with a bow and arrow. He didn't complain, even when he had to desnag a stray arrow out of his tail. Foot racing? No good at that either. The wood nymphs instructors left me in the dust. They told me not to worry about it. They'd had centuries of practice running away from lovesick gods. But still, it was a little humiliating to be slower than a tree. And wrestling? Forget it. Every time I got on that mat, Clarice would pulverize me. There's more where that came from, punk, she'd mumble in my ear. The only thing I really excelled at was canoeing. And that wasn't the kind of heroic skill people expected to see from the kid who'd beaten the Minotaur. I knew the senior campers and counselors were watching me, trying to decide who my dad was, but they weren't having an easy time of it. I wasn't strong as the Aries kids, or as good at archery as the Apollo kids. I didn't have Hephaestus's skill with metalwork, or gods forbid Dionysus's way with the vine plants. Luke told me I might be a child of Hermes, a kind of jack of all trades, master of none. But I got the feeling he was trying to make me feel better. He didn't really know what to make of me either. So if you look at the little pictures, it says Wednesday. If the goal were to hit everything but the bullseye, you'd be tough to beat. Thursday, or that's to see if he's the son of Apollo. Thursday, you realize that losing a foot race to a wood nymph is basically like coming in second place to a tree. Definitely not Definitely not the child of Hermes, speedster of the gods. And then Friday, with that face. I thought we were focusing on the male gods. Definitely not Aphrodite, goddess of beauty. So this is a kind of funny way just to show exactly what we're going through. Okay? So he was going through a ton of different things and he couldn't figure out who was his father. Despite all that, I really liked camp. I got used to the morning fog over the beach, the smell of hot strawberry fields in the afternoon, even the weird noises of the monsters in the woods. I would eat dinner with Cabin 11, scrape part of my meal into the fire, and try to feel some connection to my real dad. But nothing came. Just that warm feeling I'd always had, like the memory of his smile. I tried not to think too much about my mom, but I kept wondering, if gods and monsters were real, if all this magical stuff was possible, surely there was some way to save her, to bring her back. I started to understand Luke's bitterness and how he seemed to resent his father, Hermes. So, okay, maybe gods had important things to do, but couldn't they just call once in a while? Or thunder or something? Dionysus made Diet Coke appear out of thin air. Couldn't my dad, whoever he was, make a phone call? Thursday afternoon, 3 days after I had arrived at Camp Half Blood, I had my first sword fighting lesson. Okay, friends, there's not a picture of this one, but you have to listen very carefully, okay? I'm going to put it on Percy's face. Everybody from Cabin 11 gathered around in the big circular arena, where Luke would be our instructor. We started with basic stabbing and slashing, using some straw stuffed dummies in Greek armor. I guess I did okay. At least I understood what I was supposed to do, and my reflexes were pretty good. The problem was I couldn't find a blade that felt right in my hands. Either they were too heavy or too light or too long. Luke tried his best to fix me up, but he agreed that none of the practice blades seemed to work for me. We moved on to dueling in pairs. Luke announced that he would be my partner, since this was my first time. Good luck, one of the campers told me. Luke's the best swordsman in the last 300 years. Maybe he'll go easy on me? I said. The campers snorted. Luke showed me thrusts and parries and shield blocks the hard way. With every swipe, I got a little more battered and bruised. Keep your guard up, Percy, he'd say, then whap me in the ribs with the flat of his blade. No, not that far up. Whap. Lunge. Whap. Now back. Whap. By the time he called break, I was soaked in sweat. Everybody swarmed to the drink cooler. Luke poured ice water on his head, which looked like a good idea. I did the same. Instantly, I felt better. Strength surged back into my arms. The sword didn't feel so awkward. Everybody circle up, Luke ordered. If Percy doesn't mind, I want to give you a little demo. Great, I thought. Let's watch Percy get pounded. The Hermes guys gathered around. They were suppressing smiles. I figured they'd been in my shoes before and couldn't wait to see how Luke used me for a punching bag. He told everyone he was going to demonstrate a disarming technique. How to twist the enemy's blade with the flat of your own sword so that he had no choice but to drop his weapon. This is difficult, he stressed. I've had it used against me. No laughing at Percy now. Most swordsmen have to work years to master this technique. He demonstrated the move on me in slow motion. Sure enough, the sword clattered out of my hand. Now in real time, he said, after I retrieved my weapon. We keep sparring until one of us pulls it off. Ready, Percy? I nodded, and Luke came after me. Somehow, I kept him from getting a shot to the hilt of my sword. My senses opened up. I saw his attacks coming. I countered. I stepped forward, tried to thrust my own. Luke deflected it easily, but I saw a change in his face. His eyes narrowed, and he started to press me with more force. The sword grew heavy in my hands. The balance wasn't right. I knew it was only a matter of seconds before Luke took me down, so I figured, what the heck? I tried the disarming maneuver. My blade hit the base of Luke's, and I twisted, putting my whole weight into a downward thrust. Clang! Luke's sword rattled against the stones. The tip of my blade was an inch from his undefended chest. The other campers were silent. I lowered my sword. Sorry. For a moment, Luke was too stunned to speak. Sorry? His scarred face broke into a grin. By the gods, Percy, why are you sorry? Show me that again. I didn't want to. The burst of manic energy had completely abandoned me. But Luke insisted. This time there was no contest. The minute our swords connected, Luke hit my hilt, sent my weapon skidding across the floor. After a pause, somebody in the audience said, Beginner's luck? Luke wiped sweat off his brow. He appraised me with an entirely new interest. Maybe, he said, but I wonder what Percy could do with a balanced sword. Okay, we're on to Friday. We're going to do Friday afternoon, but because it's Friday and we're going into this, I'm going to go in here. So, friends, okay, we are about to start the Battle of the Flag. Just so you know, this chapter is a little longer, so I'm just giving you a heads up. Okay? Friday afternoon, I was sitting with Grover at the lake, resting from a near-death experience on the climbing wall. Grover had scampered to the top like a mountain goat, but the lava had almost gotten me. My shirt was smoking had smoking holes in it. The hair had been singed off my forearms. We sat on the pier watching the naiads do underwater weaving until I got up the nerve to ask Grover how his conversation had gone with Mr. D. His face turned a sickly shade of yellow. Fine, he said. Just great. So your career's still on track? He glanced at me nervous. Kyron told you I want a searcher's license? Well, no. I had no idea what a searcher's license was, but it didn't seem like the right time to ask. He said you had big plans, and that you needed credit for completing a keeper's assignment. Did you get that? Grover looked down at the naiads. Mr. D suspended judgment. He said I hadn't failed or succeeded with you yet. So our fates were still tied together. If you got a quest and I went along to protect you and we both came back alive, then maybe he'd consider it a job complete. My spirits lifted. Well, that's not so bad, right? Blah! He might as well have transferred me to stable cleaning duty. The chances of you getting a quest, and even if you did, why would you want me along? Of course I'd want you along. Grover stared glumly at the water. Basket weaving. Must be nice to have a useful skill. I tried to reassure him that he has lots of talents, but that just made him more miserable. We talked about the canoeing and sword plays for a while, and then debated the pros and cons of the different gods. Finally, I asked him about the 4 empty cabins. Number 8, the silver one, belongs to Artemis, he said. She vowed to be a maiden forever. So, of course, no kids. The cabin is, kind of honorary. If she didn't have one, she'd be mad. Oh, yeah, okay. The other 3, the ones at the end, those are the big 3? Grover tensed. There, we were getting close to a touchy subject. No. One of them's number 2, is Hera, he said. That's another honorary thing. She's the goddess of marriage. So, of course, she won't go around having affairs with mortals. That's her husband's job. We say the big 3 means the 3 powerful brothers, the sons of Kronos. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Right. After the great battle of the Titans, they took over the world from their dad and drew the lots to decide who got what. Zeus got the sky, I remembered. Poseidon got the sea, and Hades the underworld. Uh-huh. But Hades doesn't have a cabin here. No. He doesn't have a throne on Olympus either. He sort of does his own thing in the underworld. If he did have a cabin here, Grover shuddered. Well, it wouldn't be pleasant. Let's leave it at that. But Zeus and Poseidon, they both had like a bazillion kids in the myths. Why are their cabins empty? Grover shifted his hooves uncomfortably. About 60 years ago, after World War II, the big 3 agreed they wouldn't sire any more heroes. Their children were just too powerful. They were affecting they were affecting the course of human events too much and causing too much carnage or death. World War II, that was basically a fight between the sons of Zeus and Poseidon on one side and the sons of Hades on the other. The winning side, Zeus and Poseidon, made Hades swear an oath with them. No more affairs with mortal women. They swore on the river Styx. I said, that's the most serious oath you can take. Grover nodded. And the brothers kept their word. No kids? Grover's face darkened. 17 years ago, Zeus fell off the wagon. There's this TV celebrity with a big, fluffy 80s hairdo. He couldn't help himself. When their child was born, a little girl, Thalia, well, the river Styx is serious about promises. Zeus got off easy because he's immortal, but he brought a terrible fate on his daughter. But that isn't fair. It wasn't that little girl's fault. Grover hesitated. Percy, children of the big 3 have powers greater than any other half-bloods. They have a strong aura, a scent that attracts monsters. When Hades found out about the girl, He wasn't too happy about Zeus breaking his oath. Hades led the worst monsters out of Tartarus to torture Thalia. A satyr was assigned to be her keeper when she was 12, but there was nothing he can do. He tried to escort her here with a couple of other half-bloods she'd befriended. They almost made it. They got all the way to the top of that hill. He pointed across the valley to the pine tree where I'd fought the Minotaur. All three kindly ones were after them, along with a horde of bloodhounds. Means a lot of them. They were about to be overrun when Thalia told the satyr to take the other two half-bloods to safety, while she held off the monsters. She was wounded and tired, but she didn't want to live like a hunted animal. The satyr didn't want to leave her, but he couldn't change her mind, and he had to protect the others. So Thalia made her final stand alone at the top of the hill. As she died, Zeus took pity on her. He turned her into a pine tree. Her spirit still helps protect the borders of the valley. That's why the hill is called Half-Blood Hill. I stared at the pine in the distance. The story made me feel hollow and guilty too. A girl my age had sacrificed herself to save her friends. She had faced a whole army of monsters. Next to that, my victory over the Minotaur didn't seem like much. I wondered if I'd acted differently, or could I have saved my mother? Grover, I said, have heroes really gone on quests to the underworld? Sometimes, he said. Orpheus, Hercules, Houdini. Did you hear that last one, guys? Houdini? And have they ever returned somebody from the dead? No, never. Orpheus came close. Percy, you're not seriously thinking. No, I lied. I was just wondering. So, a satyr is always assigned to guard a demigod? Grover studied me warily. I hadn't persuaded him that I'd really dropped the underworld idea. Not always. We go undercover to a lot of schools. We try to sniff out half-bloods who have the making of great heroes. If we find one with a strong aura, like the child of Big Three, we alert Chiron. He tries to keep an eye on them, since they could cause really huge problems. And you found me. Chiron said you thought I might be something special. Grover looked as if I'd just led him into a trap. I didn't. Oh, listen, don't think like that. If you were, you'd never ever be allowed on a quest, and I'd never be able to get my license. You're probably a kid of Hermes, or maybe even one of the minor gods like Nemesis, the god of revenge. Don't worry about it, okay? I got the idea he was reassuring himself more than he was reassuring me. You guys ready for the battle? Okay, let the battle begin, friends. That night after dinner, there was a lot more excitement than usual. At last, it was time for Capture the Flag. When the plates were cleared away, the conch horn sounded, and we all stood at our tables. Campers yelled and cheered as Annabeth and two of her siblings ran into the pavilion carrying a silk banner. It was about 10 feet long, glittering gray, with a painting of a barn owl above an olive tree. From the opposite side of the pavilion, Clarice and her buddies ran in with another banner of identical size but gaudy red, painted with a bloody spear and a boar's head. I turned to Luke and yelled over the noise, "Those are the flags?" "Yeah." "Ares and Athena always lead the teams?" "Not always," he said, "but often." "So if another cabin captures one, what do you do? Repaint the flags?" He grinned. "You'll see. First, we have to get one. Whose side are we on?" He gave me a sly look, as if he knew something I didn't. The scar on his face made him look almost evil in the torchlight. "We've got a temporary alliance with Athena tonight. We get the flag from Ares, and you are going to help. The teams were announced. Athena had made an alliance with Apollo and Hermes, the two biggest cabins. Apparently, privileges had been traded, shower times, chore schedules, the best slots for activities in order to win support. Ares had allied themselves with everybody else: Dionysus, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus. From what I'd seen, Dionysus's kids were actually good athletes, but there were only two of them. Demeter's kids had the edge with nature skills and outdoor stuff, but they weren't very aggressive. Aphrodite's sons and daughters I wasn't too worried about. They mostly sat out every activity and checked their reflections in the lake and did their hair and gossiped. Hephaestus's kids weren't pretty, but but there were four of them. And there were four of them, but they were big and burly from working in the metal shop all day. They might be a problem. That, of course, left Ares' cabin. A dozen of the biggest, ugliest, meanest kids on Long Island or anywhere else on the planet. Chiron hammered his hoof on the marble. Heroes, he announced. You know the rules. The creek is a boundary line. The entire forest is fair game. All magical items are allowed. The banner must be prominently displayed and have no more than 2 guards. Prisoners may be disarmed, but may not be bound or gagged. No killing or maiming is allowed. I will serve as referee and battlefield medic. Sorry, wrong way. Um, arm yourselves. Uh, he spread his hands, and the tables were suddenly covered with equipment: helmets, bronze swords, spears, oxhide shields, coated in metal. Whoa, I said. We're really supposed to use these? Luke looked at me as if I were crazy. Unless you want to get skewered by your friends in cabin 5. Here, Chiron thought these would fit. You'll be on border patrol. My shield was the size of an NBA basketball or backboard, with a big caduceus in the middle of it. It weighed about 1,000,000 pounds. I could have snowboarded on it, fine, but I hoped nobody seriously expected me to run fast. My helmet, like all the helmets on Athena's side, had blue horsehair plume on top. Ares and their allies had red plumes. Annabeth yelled, "Blue team, forward!" Um, we cheered and took our swords and followed her down the path. The red team yelled taunts as they headed off toward the north. I managed to catch up with Annabeth without tripping over my equipment. Hey, she kept marching. So what's the plan? I asked. Got any magic items you can loan me? Her hand drifted to her pocket, as if she were afraid I'd stolen something. Just watch Clarissa's spear. You don't want that thing touching you. Otherwise, don't worry. We'll take the banner from Ares. Has Luke given you your job? Border Patrol. Whatever that means. It's easy. Stand by the creek. Um, Keep the Reds away. Leave the rest to me. Athena has a plan. She pushed ahead, leaving me in the dust. Okay, I mumbled. Glad you wanted me on your team. It was warm and sticky night. The woods were dark and fireflies popping in and out of view. Annabeth stationed me next to a little creek that gurgled over some rocks. Then she and the rest of the team scattered into the trees. Standing there alone with my big blue feathered helmet um, and my huge shield, I felt like an idiot. The bronze sword, like all the swords I had tried, somehow seemed balanced wrong. The leather grip pulled at my hand like a bowling ball. There was no way anybody was actually attacking me, would they? I mean, Olympus had to have liability issues, right? Far away, the conch horn blew. I heard whoops and yells in the woods, and the clanking of metal and kids fighting. A blue plumed ally from Apollo raced past me like a deer, leaped through the creek, and disappeared into enemy territory. Great, I thought. I'd miss all the fun, as usual. Then I heard a sound that sent a chill up my spine, a low canine growl somewhere close by. I raised my shield instinctively. I had the feeling someone or something was stalking me. Then the growl stopped. I felt the presence retreating. On the other side of the creek, the underbrush exploded. 5 Ares warriors came yelling at me, screaming out of the dark. Cream the punk! Clarice screamed. Her ugly pig eyes glared through the slits in her helmet. She brandished a 5-foot-long spear, its barbed metal tip flickering with red light. Her siblings had only the standard issued bronze swords. Not that that made me feel any better. They charged across the stream. There was no help in sight. I could run, or I could defend myself against half of the Ares cabin. I managed to sidestep the first kid's swing, but these guys were not as stupid as the Minotaur. They surrounded me, and Clarice thrust me with her spear. My shield deflected the point, but I felt a painful tingling all over my body. My hair stood on end. My shield went numb, or my shield arm went numb, and the air burned. Electricity. Her stupid spear was electric. I fell backward, and another Ares guy slammed me in the chest with the butt of his sword, and I hit the dirt. They could have kicked me into jelly, but they were too busy laughing. Give him a haircut, Clarice said. Grab his hair. I managed to get to my feet, but Clarice slammed, or I raised my sword, but Clarice slammed it aside with her spear as sparks flew. Now both of my arms were numb. Oh, wow, Clarice said. I'm scared of this guy. Really scared. The flag is that way, I told her. I wanted to sound angry, but I was afraid it didn't come out that way. Yeah, one of her siblings said. But see, we don't care about the flag. We care about the guy who made our cabin look stupid. You do that without my help, I told them. It probably wasn't the smartest thing to say. Two of them came at me. I backed up toward the creek, raised my shield, but Clarice was too fast. Her spear struck me in the ribs as um if I hadn't been wearing any breastplate armor, or sorry, if I hadn't been wearing any breastplated armor, it would have been a shish kebab. As it was, the electric point just about shocked my teeth out of my mouth. One of her cabin mates slashed her sword across my arm, leaving a good-sized cut. Seizing my own, Seeing my own blood made me dizzy, warm and cold at the same time. No maiming, I managed to say. Oops, the guy said. Guess I lost my dessert privilege. He pushed me back into the creek, and I landed with a splash. They all laughed. I, f- um, I figured as soon as they were through being amused, I would die. But then something happened. The water seemed to wake up my senses, just as if I had had a bag of my mom's double espresso jelly beans. Clarice and her cabin mates came into the creek to get me, but I stood to meet them. I knew what to do. I swung the flat of my sword against the first guy's head and knocked his helmet clean off. I hit him so hard I could see his eyes vibrating as he crumpled into the water. Ugly number 2 and ugly number 3 came at me. I slammed one in the face with my shield and used my sword to shear off the other guy's horse plume. Both of them backed up quickly. Ugly number 4 didn't look real anxious to attack. But Clarice, making sure I'm standing up. But Clarice kept coming. the point of her spear crackling with energy. As soon as she thrust, I caught the shaft between the edge of my sword and or my shield and my sword, and I snapped it like a twig. Ah! You idiot! You corpse breath worm! She probably would have said worse, but I smacked her between the eyes with my sword butt and sent her stumbling backward out of the creek. Then I heard a yell, elated screams. I saw Luke racing toward the boundary line with the red team's banner lifted high. He he was flanked by a couple of Hermes guys. He was flanked by a couple of Hermes guys covering his retreat, and a few Apollo behind them fighting off the Hephaestus kids. The Ares folks got up, and Clarice muttered a dazed curse. A trick, she shouted. It was a trick. They staggered after Luke, but it was too late. Everybody converged on the creek as Luke ran across into friendly territory. Our side exploded into cheers. The red banner shimmered and turned to silver. The boar and spear were replaced with a huge caduceus, the symbol of Cabin 11. On the blue team, everybody on the blue team picked up Luke and started carrying him around on their shoulders. Chiron cantered forward from the woods and blew the conch horn. The game was over. We'd won. Oh, but don't worry, friends. It's not over yet. I was about to join the celebration when Annabeth's voice right next to me in the creek said, "Not bad, hero." I looked, but she wasn't there. "Where the heck did you learn to fight like that?" she asked. The air shimmered, um, and she materialized holding a Yankees baseball cap in her hand. I felt myself getting angry. I wasn't even fazed by the fact that she'd just been invisible. "You set me up," I said. "You put me here because you knew Clarice would come after me while you sent Luke around the flank. You had it all figured out." Annabeth shrugged. "I told you. Athena always has a plan. A plan to get me pulverized. I came as fast as I could. I would have jumped in, but," she shrugged, "you didn't need my help." Then she noticed my wounded arm. "How did you get that? Or how'd you do that?" "Sword cut," I said. "What do you think?" "No, it was a sword cut. Look at it. The blood was gone. Sorry, look at it. The blood was gone. There was a huge cut, or where the huge cut had been, there was a long white scratch. And even that was fading. As I watched, it turned into a small scar and completely disappeared. I I don't get it," I said. Annabeth was thinking hard. I could almost see the gears turning. She looked down at my feet and then at Clarice's broken spear. She said, "Step out of the water, Percy." "What?" "Just do it." I came out of the creek and immediately felt bone tired. My arms started to get numb again. My adrenaline rush left. I almost fell over, but Annabeth steadied me. "Oh, sticks," she cursed. "This is not good. I assumed it would be Zeus." Before I could ask what she meant, I heard that canine growl again, but it much closer than before. A howl rippled through the forest. The campers' cheers died instantly. Chiron shouted something in ancient Greek. Only later did I realize that I understood perfectly. "Stand ready, my bow." Annabeth drew her sword. There, on the rocks just above us, was a black hound the size of a rhino with lava red eyes and fangs like daggers. It was looking straight at me. Nobody moved except Annabeth, who yelled, "Percy, run!" She tried to step in front of me, but the hound was too fast. It leapt over her, an enormous shadow with teeth, and just as it hit me, I stumbled backward and felt its razor sharp claws ripping through my armor. Um, there was a cascade of thwacking sounds, like 40 pieces of paper being ripped one after the other. The sound from the hound's neck sprouted a cluster of arrows. The monster fell dead at my feet. By some kind of miracle, I was alive. But I didn't want but I didn't want to look underneath my ruined, shredded armor. My chest felt warm and wet, and I knew I was badly cut. Another second, and the monster would have turned me into 100 pounds of deli meat. Chiron trotted up next to me, his bow in his hand, his face grim. "Dia Mortalis," Annabeth said. "That's a hellhound from the fields of punishment. They're not supposed to." "Someone summoned it," Chiron said. "Someone inside the camp." Luke came over, the banner in his hand forgotten, his moment of glory gone. Clarice yelled, "It's Percy's fault! Percy summoned it!" "Be quiet, child," Chiron told her. He watched the body of the hellhound melt into the shadows, soaking into the ground until it disappeared. "You're wounded," Annabeth told me. "Quick, Percy, get in the water." "I'm okay." "No, you're not," she said. "Chiron, watch this." I was too tired to argue. I stepped back into the creek. The whole camp gathered around me. Instantly, I felt better. I could feel the cuts on my chest closing up. Some campers gasped. "Look, I don't know why," I said, trying to apologize. "I'm sorry." But they weren't watching my wounds heal. They were staring at something above my head. "Percy," Annabeth said, pointing. Um, by the time I looked up, the sign was already fading. But I could still make out the hologram of a green lightning spinning and gleaming. A three-tipped trident. Spear. A trident. "Your father," Annabeth murmured. "This is really not good." "It is determined," Chiron announced. All around me, campers started kneeling, even the Ares cabin, though they didn't look happy about it. "My father?" I asked, completely bewildered. "Poseidon," Chiron said. "Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses. Hail Percy, son of the sea god."